Welcome everyone to the circle. Welcome as we gather and take our place here, no matter who we are, no matter what we've done, what we fail to do, whether we're single or partnered or somewhere in between, whether we're old or young or somewhere in between. Whatever the color is of our skin, whether we're on top of the world or hitting rock bottom, whether our spirits are soaring or we feel really sad today. And whatever place we find ourselves, we have a place in this circle. Whether we're a newer comer or a longer timer, big, small, tall, we each have a place, and we're welcome in this circle as we create community with each other. And we come too in deep gratitude for this land which is our home, this land and to which we have a covenant relationship with the land and with the peoples who have long been in this land. We come mindful of the history and the spirituality and the culture of the Cree peoples who've made their home here for generations, and the heritage of so many of us who have come to this land more recently in generations back. We cast this circle with each other as together we seek wisdom and we seek truth. Sometimes just a spark of kindness can light a wildfire of compassion. We've seen it over and over again in our experience. We've seen it recently as peoples across the world have stood in solidarity with families who are heartbroken and for tragedy that is unthinkable and unspeakable. We light this candle, knowing that together we have the capacity to ignite compassion in our families, in our workplaces, in our neighborhoods, in all the circles in which we live and move and have our being. We center ourselves this day in the light that is within us and between us, among us and beyond us. And as we gather with one another, we seek to focus our thoughts in this time, and we offer these words reminding ourselves of who we are and why we gather in spiritual community like this. We are a generous people. But sometimes we live fearfully, rather than gratefully. We are a kind and caring people. But sometimes we are hurtful in our speech and our actions. We are a justice-seeking people. But sometimes we are complicit in injustice by our silence and by our actions. We are a compassionate people. But sometimes we neglect opportunities to pray with our feet. We are a people who seek to live our highest values and bring our best humanity to all the circles in which we live. This is the time to deepen our resolve to act justly, speak kindly, and walk humbly. And this is a time, whether you're, again, perfect, Cara. We know what to do, whether you're big or small or tall or somewhere in between, come and gather on the carpet as we have a few minutes with each other. This is usually a time when we get to talk to Chris, but Chris is away today. And I have a chance to talk to you about kindness. Did anybody do a kind thing for you recently? Yeah, tell us about it. Yeah, that's a kind time. Did anybody else have something kind happen to them? Somebody do a nice kind thing? Did something kind happen? Yeah. Did you maybe do a kind thing for somebody recently? You think of a... Yeah, Allison, showing love to somebody. Yeah. Well, I want to show you a little clip of a video about a guy who's thinking about if he were president of the United States, and he's a kid. He calls himself the kid president, and he's got some really good ideas about how to spread kindness. And here's some of what he has to say.
Oh, they smell like America. Today's episode is about giving back and about how good can spread. I'm gonna need a bigger bag. Got too much good to give. You're not one of those people who say the world can't be changed. You believe that it's everybody's duty to give the world a reason to dance, right? We have a whole world to make more awesome. People, we need you. We really need you. Kids, people who used to be kids, everybody. But how, Kid President? Everything's terrible. Hey, quiet you. I know, sometimes things can look pretty dark, but there's always light. Light is always still there. In fact, let me show you how good spreads. Yeah, this is my baby right here. Okay, I need you guys to listen up. This is how good spreads. Let's read. How does good spread? Can we make the world brighter? Can we together make somebody's load lighter? Some people think good only spreads if you have lots of money, or a nonprofit who makes a cool video that's slick and really funny. Meow. Burp. Does good only spread when you have the right hashtag, or the right bracelet or t-shirt, or give out free tote bags? Does good happen by accident, just out of the blue? Does good only spread when Beyonce allows it to? Queen Bee? She's pretty powerful, but wow, so are you. The world's only seen a glimpse of what you can do. Your heart is so big, but you might feel so small. I'm telling you now, you're thinking as a flaw. Good spreads when good is spread. And that's totally how you live. You share and you love, and you give and give and give. If someone needs lifting, you send them a rope. Your little whispers of love sends out huge gusts of hope. I know what you're thinking. That's a nice little story you're reading, Kid President. But what about me? You wanna know how you can make good things spread in the world? Show up. Show up in the world. You'll be a light. You'll see work to be done on your left and your right. Like Caitlin, a girl who met people in need and started putting inspiring words on dusty old keys. Now she gives people jobs and second chances. She's filling the world with more and more dances. Or Ricky, a funny guy who wanted to share random acts of kindness everywhere. Communities are changing in Cleveland and tons of other places because Ricky just wanted to put smiles on folks' faces. I mean, there's other things too. Ever heard of Socktober? Well, Brad, the guy behind the camera here, before we started all this Q President stuff, he started Socktober. He was just a guy who wanted to make a difference. He was just a sad, pale man.
Hey, come on.
It's just the truth. Well, anyway, he heard socks were one of the most needed but least donated item in homeless shelters, right when they're preparing in the winter months. There are over 600,000 men and women who are homeless in the United States. And some of them were children. He started telling some friends, and then they started telling some friends, and telling schools, and telling churches. And then the next year, grew even bigger. We started this little Kid President project, and I invited some people to help out. October! And you totally have. October drives have happened all over the United States, in every single state, and on every single continent. That's the whole world, y'all. There's just a need. There's good to be done, and we're inviting people to do it. I guess that's just how good spreads. So how will you show up? How will you make things brighter? By loving the people next to you, and making your loads lighter. Anger is contagious. Hate and fear, they are too. But I'm not here to spread those, and neither are you. We're here to spread hope and make the world dance. Open your eyes and your heart, and we might stand a chance. Get out of your comfort zone, and get out of your head. Get to loving people, and good can't help but be spread. Woo! Oh, don't know about y'all, but I'm ready. Ready to dance. Ooh, mail.
So our Kid President friend, he knows how to spread good. Just keep planting good seeds. And I gather today in Kid Spirit, you're going to plant some seeds. And a chance while you're planting seeds to be thinking about some kind... Hey, what did you miss? You missed Kid President, but we can show it to you after. He was pretty funny. But you didn't miss a chance to plant some seeds, and while you're planting those seeds, to be thinking about...
Did I miss the story?
Well, there was kind of a story, yeah. It was kind of up there on the wall, but I'll show it to you after. You have some opportunity to think about how you're going to plant seeds of kindness as you plant those seeds for other people. That's a really good start. That's a great idea. First make holes and then put the seeds in.
Well, are the plants for us?
Yeah. I think Bonnie's going to tell you all about where they're going to go or who they're for. So, have a great morning. This is a piece that was written in June of 2010 called Patience by Tag Williams. Rain falling on a mountaintop, one drop at a time, dissolving, changing, rearranging the shape of the world. And so we wear down continents, one drop at a time. Thoughts falling on a fertile mind, one idea at a time, dissolving, changing, rearranging the shape of the world. So we wear down prejudice, one idea at a time. Earth collides along a fault line, 1 inch at a time, building, changing, rearranging the shape of the world. So we build vast continents, 1 inch at a time. Compassion holds out hands of hope, one kindness at a time. Building, changing, rearranging the shape of the world, and so we build community, one kindness at a time. This is the insight of a contemporary writer. Parables, small stories that seem really simple but make us scratch our heads. Small stories or metaphors about really ordinary things that make us think twice or question our assumptions. These kinds of stories, they are the favorites in the teachings that our tradition attributes to Jesus of Nazareth. These little stories are often about things that never happened and are always happening. He often drew on the context of his own Middle Eastern Jewish world, like these 2 very short stories that come from a gospel written more than 15 years after he died. These are images that his peers and those hearing the story decades later would recognize. From Luke's gospel. And Jesus said, "What's the kingdom of God like? To what should I compare it?" He said, "It's like a mustard seed that someone took and sowed in a garden. It grew and became a tree, and the birds of the air nested in its branches." And again he said, "To what should I compare the kingdom of God? It's like a yeast that a woman took and mixed in with 3 measures of flour until it was all leavened." In these first century parables, Sometimes it's the really little things that make the biggest difference. The small acts of kindness that come our way. Those two-bit chances that make something turn out differently. Someone who saw potential in us that no one else saw. An employer who helped open doors for us. Or maybe a fellow parent who gave us advice about our children that made all the difference. Or maybe just someone who heard us through a very dark time. If we took a few moments to speak with each other, our lives are the testimony to the power of little things. And those small acts of kindness stand out because they sometimes emerge as a great contrast to the character of the larger context we find ourselves in. Sometimes they're the foreground against a background of loss or a long stretch of bad luck or a toxic environment we find ourselves in a relationship or a workplace, or a tough patch in a relationship, or against the despair of the world. I remember a very self-absorbed time in my life, a time when I was utterly preoccupied with decisions that I had to make and the implications those decisions would have on others. And it felt like I hadn't seen the sun in longer than I could remember. And I was in my small and selfish world of the moment, and I was putting money in a parking meter on my way to an appointment, when I noticed an older woman pulling a grocery cart up the hill. And she stopped, and she spoke to me about nothing in particular. But somehow her act of stopping and speaking to me broke into my small little world and engaged me in a very simple human exchange that somehow was like a rope that pulled me out of the place where I was. It was a conversation about nothing special, just a plain, nothing fancy human moment that somehow nudged me out of my own locked room. I often wish to have that moment back and return the kindness with the thought I had as she walked up the street to offer to carry her groceries up the hill to her door. She'll never know how many times I returned to her simple act of kindness in speaking to a stranger. It was leaven, a little yeast that made my heart rise. Just sharing a smile, risking a greeting, speaking a few kind words with a complete stranger she'd never see again. We often think, but what good is a little leaven of kindness stacked up against a mountain of meanness or bullying or indifference? What's a few sprinkles of yeast in the face of a kilo of flour? According to the Jesus tradition, it's enough to make a difference. In fact, it's enough to create more bread than the average peasant family could eat before it would mold. For this first century teacher, that little bit of leaven creates a situation capable of transforming a situation of scarcity into an occasion for hospitality. If we listen to the teachings of this first century wisdom teacher with our 21st century ears, it sounds a little bit like a contemporary teen. Well, the kingdom, it's like treasure. Well, it's like, it's like a pearl, and it's kind of like it's like a banquet, like a really big banquet, and it's like a seed growing secretly under the ground. One of Jesus' really radical short stories is that little one we heard a moment ago about a very small seed. And it's as if he said, like there was this gardener. And like the gardener went out into a field where like a whole bunch of dandelions had gone to seed. And the gardener collected as many seeds as he could. And like he came home, and like he went out into his garden, and like he planted as many of those dandelion seeds as he possibly could. Wouldn't you like to live next door to that guy? And even if this is the only story we ever heard Jesus tell, we'd know he came from a long line of carpenters and he didn't know anything about farming. Because what farmer in his right mind plants weeds? But Jesus tells just that kind of an outrageous story when he said, heaven on earth is like someone who just intentionally and methodically plants weeds in his garden. Everyone in first century Mediterranean society knew that mustard is the dandelion of the Middle East. It's a weed. And once it's sown, it's almost impossible to get rid of. It's an infiltrator, an invasive weed that tends to take over. And we've made this metaphor into a kind of charming little simile about the capacity of a little bit of faith as small as the grain of mustard seed moving mountains across continents. But Jesus is saying something way more radical than that. It's about the power of infiltrating, of being a community that's like a community of dandelions, bent on infiltrating the dominant culture, the meanness of an empire that has no heart, that only has appetite. Appetite like the Roman Empire to control all the resources, land and the fishery. To infiltrate that kind of a culture with an alternative ethic. To plant kindness like a weed that eventually sneaks in and takes over the field. What if we were to plant seeds of kindness and sow them carefully on the cultivated fields that dominate our culture? Fields like individualism, competition, capitalism, consumerism, globalization, and so on. What if we were to infiltrate a selfish culture with simple acts of kindness? For sure, the world needs that gentle work of leaven. But it also needs that sneaky, infiltrating work of kindness. Being just like yeast and just like mustard seeds, it needs love that quietly leavens and love that boldly colors the field with a whole different look. one weed of kindness that seeds yet another and another and another. But kindness isn't always easy, and it isn't always convenient. And it's sometimes a rebellion against our first instincts. It's usually a choice. To speak or act kindly takes intention. It requires an element of risk, like the woman who stopped me on the street. The risk of whether we'll be warmly received or coldly rejected. Whether it will be deeply valued or entirely unnoticed. Because kindness isn't really a very sexy virtue. In a culture that's addicted to immediate responses, in a culture that's consumed with self-interest and self-protection, it's sometimes radical to initiate kindness. But the etymology of our language gives us a really big clue. That word kindness, it wraps itself around the notion of kin. That kindness has something, maybe everything, to do with treating each other as though we were kin. As though we were all our kind, ourselves. And that kindness takes mindfulness. Paying attention to our words and maybe filtering them at least 3 times before we speak or before we act, to ask ourselves, is it true? Is it helpful? And is it kind? Because we mostly live in mundanely sacred moments. Few of us positioned to be in the kind of power to change the world in monumental shifts, but each of us in positions with extraordinary power and capacity to change the shape of a moment, of a relationship, of a transaction, of an exchange, of an encounter, of a meeting, of a deal. We have the capacity to practice kindness in the spaces that we inhabit and to change the world an inch, 2.54 centimeters at a time, with the smallest of seeds, as small as the mustard seed and as effective as yeast, with a humble seed called kindness that comes in so many different varieties, and it grows in any soil, and it does well in any climate, and it can be planted in any season. We just have to be awake to the opportunities we have to infiltrate with kindness, to practice being a dandelion. we have of strengthening the muscle of our intentions. So we take a few moments to think about what it is we intend for our lives, for our actions, for our interactions. And I invite us to strengthen our intentions as we speak these words that are the prayer of a community of spiritual seekers who gather in West Hill United Church in Scarborough, Ontario, who have been offering this prayer for more than 13 years now as a way, when they come together each Sunday morning, of strengthening their intention, of speaking their commitment. And so we pray with one another. As I live every day, I want to be a channel for peace. May I bring love where there is hatred, and healing where there is hurt, joy where there is sadness, hope where there is fear. I pray that I may always try to understand and comfort other people, that I may also seek comfort and understanding from them. Wherever possible, may I choose to be a light in the darkness, a times of need, a caring, honest friend, and may justice, kindness, and peace flow through my heart forever. Amen. We go knowing the power of a spark, the power of a seed, the power of a weed. And we go to offer our acts of kindness as though they had the power to infiltrate, which they do, any situation, the power to be as leaven, raising up hope and possibility, changing the spirit of things. And so we go with one another to sing our way through the difficulties, the smallness, the meanness, the cruelty, and to offer our seeds of kindness.
Hey, it's Christopher. Thanks for watching this video. If you want to watch last week's video, click this button right here. If you can manage it and can donate to SSUC to help us continue this video page, click right here. And for any information that you want about SSUC and our programs, visit our website right there.